Welcome to Finding You Now. I'm your host, Amanda Ashworth, and on today's show, we have Noona Nafousi. Noona used to be an executive headhunter and spent 14,000 hours interviewing people. And from that, she's now transitioned into being an executive and corporate coach. Welcome, Noona.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honoured.
No, welcome. So you made the transition about 3 years ago.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay. And do you want to talk to the audience a bit about your backstory and kind of what made you make that switch out of the corporate world?
Yeah. So after I had my kids, everything kind of changed for me a little bit. So I had two children in 2 years, and
Wow.
I I put on a lot of weight when I had my kids. And the way when I went back to work when my daughter was 6 months. And then when she was 9 months, I got pregnant again and then had to take time off for my son, but went back to work. So I had two under two in nappies working full time. And I'd put on quite a lot of weight, and I didn't realize at the time, but it's only with hindsight that I can see what happened. Is I was also the main breadwinner at the time, and it just somebody at work. We were in a boardroom, and they were talking about what your next 6 months goals are, and I said I really want to lose 20 kilos of my baby weight. And one of the managing partners in the boardroom, there was only about 7 or 8 of us in there, who sat right opposite me. He elbowed the guy sat next to him, pointed him at him and laughed. And when I left the meeting, I went straight to the to the loo and burst out crying. I did make a complaint to HR, but it was a very difficult situation because him and HR were having some affair. So
Right. Okay.
that didn't really go down very well. And I'll never forget this, that my boss at the time, who I had worked with for 7 years, he came to my kids' baby showers, he would come over, he'd met my parents. In the actual meeting, he said to me, "What do you want me to do about it?" And maybe he didn't suckle enough milk from his mother's breast when he was a baby.
Right. Yeah. Not
And
helpful.
and not helpful at all. And I remember sitting there thinking, is this what I'm leaving my kids for?
Yeah.
To come here. I mean, I had a really good job. I was earning loads of money. I was, enough money for us to go on holiday, to pay for the kids' nursery, to pay for, very privileged in Dubai, to have help at home. And everything on paper looked great, but inside I felt awful. I even can feel my chest getting quite heavy when I talk about it. I remember like the amount of times I'd get in the car and just sob on the way home.
But do you now look back and go, almost it was a blessing? Because if that hadn't have happened, you wouldn't have left the corporate world.
Exactly. And actually what happened, I'm one of these people who I did enjoy the corporate world. I really loved recruitment. I had a real gift in interviewing people, which obviously has transcended to me being a coach. And I did really enjoy it. But the company that I was working for was not right for me. And I was too scared to look for another job. I was, you have responsibilities as well. And what happened at the time is my boss demoted me. And then during COVID made me redundant. And in the UAE, you get a gratuity pay when you leave. And I hadn't signed a contract to say that I accept the salary decrease. And the gratuity that I had was on the new salary, which was 40% less than original. So I got hardly any gratuity. And my breaking point was, we were in lockdown. Husband was on unpaid leave. That gratuity we needed to pay the mortgage and I just remember going into the loo to cry, and my daughter walked in, seeing me on the bathroom floor sobbing, and I thought, I can't do this anymore. I need to pull myself back up. This is either going to make me or break me, and I decided that it was going to make me. And I wish I could go back and tell that woman that she could have used her voice more, and she was doing nothing wrong, and she didn't deserve to be spoken to like that. And now what I do is really help people who are in the corporate world to fall back in love with their jobs, if whether it's moving, but more than anything, it's owning who you are and not allowing anyone to suck the life out of you. And the only reason that happens, in fact, I allowed it, and I didn't have the tools that I have now. And if just one person can reconnect to who they are, that would be amazing for me.
Yeah. Why do you think at that time you struggled having your voice?
I think for me, it was definitely the fact that I was exhausted.
Yeah.
I was really tired. 2 children under 2, back to working full time. I still wanted to go to the gym to lose some weight. So I'd leave the house at 5 a.m. so that I could go to the gym, get into the office by 7. And I had to leave at 5:30 so I could go and pick up the kids at 6 to take them home, to bath them and put them to bed. And the weekends were just, not really weekends. They were, as much as I tried to take them out and do things with them, what it's like with two young children. And I think, first of all, I was exhausted and I had completely lost the identity of who I was.
Yeah.
And I had kids quite late on. I had my daughter when I was 36, and she was born when I was 36, and my son was 37, I think, 37, 38. And I was a real career woman. I loved the way that I would dress at work. I took a real identity in the way I dressed, how I showed up, my lunches, all of this. And when I had kids, I completely lost my identity.
Yeah.
I lost my confidence. And I didn't know where I fitted in anymore.
I think
within myself.
Yeah, that's the hard thing, I think, when you have children and you've been in the corporate world, because it's so different. And suddenly, overnight, you're not necessarily ready to go and sit at parenting groups and talk about sleepless nights and poo. There's still that part in you that just goes, I can have an intelligent conversation that isn't about my child, and I would quite like to have that.
Yeah. And it's trying to rediscover who you are as a mum and somebody who's also working and also a wife and also a friend. And I just felt very disjointed in myself. But looking on the outside, looking in, like I said, on paper, everything looked great. Inside, I felt anything but. There was a real internal battle. And then it's very different to what things are like now. Even in 5 years, people are much more open to say, I'm struggling. And 5 years ago, pre-COVID, that wasn't as encouraged as it is now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I just completely lost who I was. And so I didn't even know what my voice was, to be honest.
Yeah. So how did you go about discovering your voice?
So I went through deep healing. I went through some deep healing. I spoke to, I did everything that I possibly could. I've also always been into personal development. I did my master's NLP when I was 26.
Okay.
And I started working with a coach who was a healer, who was intuitive, and just her name is Caroline Britton, and she really healed me from the inside. Yeah. The work that we did together was really deep, and once I integrated who I was, I just came out stronger.
Yeah.
Knowing who I was, it just, everything for me changed after that. And I knew that I wanted to do coaching, because that's essentially what I was doing as a headhunter, was coaching people on how to get jobs. So I started doing that. And even in the beginning, I was doing mums, and then I kept changing. Then it went to self-love, and now I'm coaching in the corporate world.
Okay, brilliant. And so you kind of back to where you kind of found where you loved in the first place, but just in a different role.
Yeah, exactly. And the things that I loved the most about my role as a headhunter was really getting to know why people thought that they weren't going to get the job. So I'd interview someone and they'd say, oh, I don't know if I'm going to get this interview. And then I would coach them. And now I do a lot of corporate coaching where I help companies to I coach their staff in how to feel better on the inside, how to rediscover your voice, because you can teach someone all the strategy in the world, but unless they truly believe that they're going to succeed, they're just not. And if you don't have any strategy but have belief, you're going to make it work. And more companies are realizing that. And so I get hired as corporate coach, and then I do one-to-one executive coaching for people who are in senior positions like I was then, because they don't have anyone to speak to in those roles.
I think that's really amazing, because I think that is definitely a shift that's coming in, because where you would have L&D before, it was all very much around processes and becoming better at your job. And for you, after you'd had children, how much did imposter syndrome kind of show up for you?
I don't think I realised it at the time. And I don't think for me it was so much imposter syndrome. It was more, I mean, I always knew that I was very good at my job, and I was very good at my job. I'd done it for 22 years. So it wasn't, for me, that's not something that had affected me personally. I think it was more imposter of like, who am I? It was more of an identity for me. And that threw me off. It just, because I'd always been very sure of who I was, how I was showing up. And that knocked my confidence. It really, that really affected me. And maybe it led into a bit of imposter syndrome, because the people who I worked with in recruitment, they're very young in the company that I was. The people that they were bringing in were getting younger and younger and younger. They were in their 20s. And I guess there just wasn't a connection. Really what I should have done is applied for another job.
Yeah.
I was too scared.
So I was in recruitment for 10 years, and I made the decision after my eldest was born that actually it didn't really suit me, because I used to take my bad months home with me. So when things were great at work, everything was great. But what I now realise is how much of the corporate world requires you to step into masculine energy all of the time. And that actually that was causing a huge imbalance for me. And just the juggle was incredible. But like you said, it was a lot of younger people. So when you have to go and get a child from nursery, you have to leave. There was no more, staying late, working weekends, just because I couldn't do it.
I was just saying, no, I completely agree with what we were saying about the masculine energy. You do take on this pushing and forcing, but what I've been really learning about, and what I do teach some of the companies that are definitely more inclined to go into the feminine, is if I knew what I knew now again, is that I would have leaned more into trust when I was those months in recruitment that dropped, instead of hustling and pushing and forcing. And I would have taken much more aligned action. I would have really lent into my feminine energetics in the workplace. And I think that would have made it a bit more balanced for me. And I love learning about that and teaching about that as well.
Yeah, I think it's something that's not greatly understood, and I think more people are realizing it, and realizing that it's not a male and female thing, that actually we all have these traits. And actually, when you find a beautiful balance, there is a time and place for each energy, but there needs to be a balance. So with what you do now, who do you work with?
So I work with corporates. I do, and mainly the people that I coach in corporates are leaders. And the reason is because I really do believe it all starts from the top. And I saw firsthand that when you have a boss or a manager or whatever they want to call themselves these days, a leader, when they are not aligned in terms of how they are acting, if they are going around telling people the kind of things that my boss told me that I said in the beginning, that's going to trickle down. And so I think if you can start coaching people on identifying what people's limiting beliefs are, working on, teaching them more about emotional intelligence, having empathy, trusting your team more, trusting yourself more, and it all starts with ourselves anyway. I think that's going to make the biggest impact in the corporate world. And in terms of one-to-one, I mainly work with senior professionals and people who have been at work for about 10 years and they're now entering the second stage of their careers. Because if you've just started, the hustling, the pushing, the forcing, the having lack of boundaries, the saying yes to things, that may well help you in the beginning. And you're young and you know, it may, I think you can figure your way out around when you're starting. I think when you get to your second stage of your career, those skills that got you here are not going to be the ones that are going to get you to the next stage. You need a new set of skills, much stronger boundaries. You need to, especially if you're, you know, got children and family life, it's a whole new set of skills that you need to develop. And so those are mainly the clients that I work with one-to-one.
And do you see much of a difference between men and women at that level?
Do you know what? Kind of, but also no. So I still have senior men who come to me who are not using their voice, who struggle to, you know, who are a bit too agreeable, who have lack of self-confidence. I would say the difference is that the men who come are very action orientated. So they're like, tell me what I need to do and I need to do it and we'll go through it. And so the results that they see can be a lot quicker. They've made the investment, they want to change and they will go for it. Now, the women probably, sometimes it can take a bit more time because we are much more, and I don't mean I don't know how this can take it, we're more complex in that we have so many more things on our plate. We have mental fatigue in terms of remembering, is there enough milk? What's on World Book Day? And all of these things. So it does take a little bit longer because we literally don't have the mental capacity to just go, right, this is what we're going to do and that's do it. It can take time. But again, you know, my clients and the women, they get incredible results from just unpacking what's going on internally and knowing that I'm not going crazy. This is
No. And so from the companies that you've worked with, what kind of results have you had?
Yeah, they've been really fascinating. So it's just learning how to deal with the staff differently. So instead of just it being numbers, saying, how are you feeling about this task that I've given you? Do you believe that you're going to do it? And that there's much more empathy that has been developed in the leaders, so that emotional intelligence has gone up, and they're having a more engaged and productive workforce. So people are much more open. The big one as well is feedback. And they, rather than just expecting people to perform really well, they're actually spending the time to give people feedback rather than just criticizing them and saying, I love the way that you did this, but I would like people that aren't taught how to give feedback or taught how to do it in a way that's motivating. And if they're not taught how to do it, then you can't blame them that people on the other side are saying like, why are you criticizing me? So yeah, it's been definitely a more engaged workforce is the feedback that I'm getting.
And has that had an impact on their bottom line, but also their staff retention as well?
Definite retention, because as a headhunter, I know exactly why people leave jobs, and it's not for money. It's how they feel. Are they heard? Sorry,
No. Carry on.
Yeah, so it's how they feel. Are they being heard? Do they get enough training? Do they feel heard? You know, do they feel seen by their managers? Are they appreciated? All of these things. It is so easy for me as a headhunter to headhunt someone who is earning really good money to move for not much of an increase because the culture at work is not right. And at the moment, CEOs are being rewarded bonus wise for retention, exactly the same as growth. So more and more companies are looking at how to retain. Well, it's bringing the humanness back into work.
So if you were a mum now and you had gone back to work and you were feeling stuck, so similar to the position that you were in, what would you do differently now?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would do is actually say just stand your ground. have really strong boundaries. Like, one of the things I probably would have stuck to, that if my child's sick, I will go.
Yeah.
Because I really regret the moments that they were sick and I left them with my mom, or left them, with the nanny at work at home. And now looking back, I wish I'd really been very strong on my boundaries and said, this is how it's going to happen. I will go home if one of them's sick. I probably would have just built my confidence on the inside and used my voice so much more, spoken up. And if that meant repercussions, I would have dealt with them. And having boundaries was what I was willing to tolerate in the work environment, and really trusting that no matter what, I was going to be okay, instead of
I
leading
think once you have children, don't know, there's a almost like a level of vulnerability that's unlocked.
Yeah.
That, especially if you've been in the corporate world, you haven't been exposed to. And like, I find that men don't seem to take, the guilt isn't the same. So mum guilt is very, very prevalent and very, very, and it's crazy how strong it is. But then on the flip side, there's also that mental load that you talk about. And, I'm really, really lucky with the partner that I have in terms of the way that we balance it, but that isn't always the case. So it feels sometimes that women are taking on a huge amount, and overwhelm is probably the number one thing that I deal with.
Yeah.
Just because people are frazzled.
Yeah, absolutely. Because not only are you doing most of, so, I was still waking up in the night with my kids. I'm the one that they wanted when they were sick. I was still sorting out the things from the nursery, figuring out what they were going to have for lunch when they were at nursery, all of these things, arranging all the weekend, the play dates, all of that, taking them for their shots at the same time, still working full time and trying to figure out what we're going to have for dinner, and do we have enough. Just even now saying it makes me feel so exhausted, because it's physical. It's not even physical. It's the mental list that's constantly going on while you're walking. For me, I was walking an interview, remembering, I must buy this on my way home, and they need some new shoes, and we got to do. It's just constant. It never ended. And I think that mental fatigue, it does lead to burnout, because you just don't know. Or at the time, I wanted to be the perfect mum and the perfect employee. And I think the advice I'd give myself now is, when you're at work, do work.
Yeah.
And when you're at home, switch off, which is hard, but I probably would have really been quite strict with myself with that.
Yeah, I think that was one of the changes that I noticed. Was, in some ways, I became more productive when I went to less hours, because I had to be.
Yeah.
And so I was able to fit a lot in. But I think what a lot of women struggle with is then delegating, and then at home saying, actually, there's too much on, I need help with this, or, actually, I need some time to myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I realized what time to myself even meant. I just didn't even. It's only now that I've realized the power of solitude, and how, I didn't even know what filling your own cup meant. It was just go, go, go. And the reaction to that is I became a complete control freak.
Yeah.
It would do it this way. You've got to, even if my husband tried to help, it was like, well, you've got to do it this way, because that was my way of dealing with the stress and the overwhelm. Is I just became so controlling. And, again, I guess that's another piece of advice I'd give myself. Like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to do everything. Just let it go.
Yeah. And this is, I think, because we end up in the masculine. So we very much, do, to-do lists, and just going, actually look at your to-do list and see what you can take off of it for a start, what doesn't matter, and then see what you can actually do tomorrow.
Yeah.
That the world doesn't end because you've not done some washing, or, your children miss something. But when you're in it, it's very hard to feel that and you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, it really is. And I remember going to kids' birthday parties and looking at other mums and thinking, my God, they've got it so sorted. And, they just seemed like so polished, and the party just seemed like all these little, everything was arranged and everything. And I just was like hanging by a thread. I was absolutely exhausted. And I have to admit as well, I remember when I started my coaching, and I was on a training program, and one of these women said, you don't have to enjoy going to kids' birthday parties. It's okay to admit that they're not fun. And that, I know it sounds really simple, but it really blew my mind, because I thought, I actually really don't. I really don't enjoy going to them. And so I started asking my husband to take them, or, asking someone else if they could, once they got a bit older, like, should you do this one, I'll do the next one with a friend. And that within itself, admitting like, I really don't have to like these things, and it's okay. It's okay to give yourself that grace. And
I think hindsight is a brilliant thing. So my eldest is going to be 15 this month. And
Wow.
because of every activity and extracurricular thing that he's done over the years, I know how quickly they start them and then how quickly they stop them.
Yeah.
So with my younger two, I don't feel that pressure to have them enrolled in everything, and actually downtime is really good for them.
Yeah.
And I think we don't often question sometimes why we're doing things.
Yeah.
I think COVID was really good. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I love what you said about teaching them that downtime's important. I really, really love that. I think that's so powerful, because you get sucked in into, let me give them so many different activities, let me keep them busy, and them learning to relax is something I never learned at all. It was push, push, push. In my house, you don't sit down for a second, and I still struggle with it. So yeah, I love what you said, that teaching them to slow down and just be still for a while.
But I think, COVID taught us that actually the world can be a slower place. And I know I said, I'm never going to be this busy again. And then instantly after, I started to fill things up. And so how would you say, who is Noona now? How is Noona different?
Oh my God, so different. Well, I'm definitely a recovered people pleaser. I'm so much better at saying no, and I don't feel guilty about it. I feel real power. I'm really empowered when I say no to things that I don't want to. I definitely speak my mind, and say what I want, and I'm good at verbalizing my needs. And I'm less angry. I'm a lot happier, comfortable in my own skin. And the big thing for me is what you were saying about slowing down. I actually carve out time in the day where I just sit in silence and just sit still. And I've really learned, especially when you've got young kids, I didn't realize that mums get overstimulated.
Yeah.
And mums need, I never even knew what my nervous system meant when it was shot. All I knew was the reaction of losing my temper, or feeling frazzled, or going to bed exhausted every day and waking up exhausted just thinking about my to-do list. And now I'm just so much more calmer and aware of what it is that I want. Joy, I'm really good at creating joy in my life, for me alone, and then for others. It's just as much slower. I'm a much slower, calmer, more relaxed version of who I was, and happier as well.
Brilliant. And so how do you work with people, corporates, just on a one-to-one basis?
I do one-to-one. I do one-to-one. I'm actually, in the next couple of months, launching a group program, which is all about I've got my own power framework for teaching people how to step into their personal power, overcoming fear, taking radical responsibility, using your voice. So I'll be launching that in about June. But yeah, one-to-one. And then I do corporate training as well.
Okay, brilliant. And how can people find you on social?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn under Noona Nafousi. I've got my company is called Neo Noor. So you can look at the website for that. Or I'm really active on Instagram as well under Noona Nafousi too.
Okay, brilliant. And so you've got your group coaching in the summer. What else is next for you?
I really love the idea of doing like a weekend day retreats for people who, in the corporate world who just want to check out for a bit. And that's what, like 10 till 3 or something that's not too long, but something for people who are in the corporate world or mums who work, who just want to just tap back into what it is they want, what they're looking for. So I love the idea of doing a retreat for people who work and have kids and want to check out, but don't have the ability to go on like 2-week self-discovery programs in Bali or something.
That really does sound amazing, because I know from my friends that are working full time, they feel that that they're out of the loop with a lot of things because they're at work, and then when they're out of work they feel that almost that's the time that they should be spending with their children, so then they don't get that much downtime at all.
Exactly. So if you could just do like a weekend, 10 till 3, 2 days, and you can do some breath work and do some, internal discoveries, or just have get a group of different people who can facilitate it. I think somewhere really beautiful. We're so lucky in Dubai. We've got so many beautiful places. So yeah, I'd really love to do something like that.
That sounds amazing. So kind of wrapping up, what 3 tips would you give to mums in the corporate world that are struggling to find their voice?
The first thing I would say is ask for help. Really ask for help, no matter how uncomfortable you feel. And it can be really uncomfortable in the beginning. Ask for help. Don't have to do everything. Lose the control. Schedule in some joy. And if you don't know what joy feels like anymore, then sit down and try and remember what makes you feel joyful, and schedule in 1 a week to start with, and then try and bring some daily joy into your life. It could be reading a book. It could be sitting on your own in a room just with no distractions. And yeah, it's okay to just do what you want to do for a while.
And finally, what brings you joy?
What brings me joy? Do you know what really brings me joy is, again, it's that solitude. It really does. I don't know if you do human design, but I've got a hermit in my human design, and I just really like to just have my moment. It could be 5 minutes, just sitting on my own with a nice candle, deep breathing, and then I'm ready to face everything. So solitude to prepare me for everything.
Yeah, so human design is an area that really interests me, but nobody knows when I was born.
Oh, really?
So I'm just like, so I've kind of read through lots of profiles, and it's definitely something that I want to investigate more,
Yeah,
because it's an area I've got really into energy
yeah,
and vibrations, and it's just an area that I think is a natural area for me to kind of go down.
yeah.
But it's really fascinating.
It's
But
amazing.
no, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's
But
amazing.
do you think that also, as you get older, your solitude, you just value it more?
You do. I do value it more. I think I've always had, I notice it in my daughter as well. Like I'm one of 4 and there's 9 cousins. And I notice that when it's too much, she'll just take herself off for a little while. I just love that. Kids are so intuitive, aren't they? She'll just take herself off and play on her own. And I thought, okay, I clocked it and thought, now I know that's something that she really needs. And I think yeah, I'm extrovert, but I do need that time to just recalibrate and bring all my energies back and own it. So I think as you get older, you're much more, I think you've always needed it. My thing is, I think as you get older, you feel less guilty about asking for it.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that I just relish the time that I spend alone.
Yeah,
That's where my greatest ideas come from. And it really does fill my cup up. But it's like you say, it's those moments of joy. I'm a massive on practicing gratitude, and it's finding those little things that just mount up to a really happy, contented life.
Yeah, they really do. And recently I was doing this course about called Infinite Wealth. A lady called Susie Ashworth does it. And in the course, she was really saying how for you to feel wealthy, it's finding wealth in those tiny moments. And imagine that you had already made all the money in the world. How would you then embody those tiny moments of being with your kids, of if you had it? And I really started tapping into that, and it was just mind blowing. Like, just sitting down with the kids doing some painting. It doesn't matter how much money you've made, that's still a moment. But if you can tap into the wealth of that moment, or sitting with my dad or my mum, and it really, really, I found it so powerful, really powerful into tapping
But I
into.
think sometimes we make ourselves so busy and almost frazzled
Yeah,
that's when we stop forgetting those moments, because
yeah,
even when we're in them, we're not present in them. We're
yeah.
thinking about the next thing that we have to do, and so we almost suck the joy out of ourselves just by never slowing down.
Yeah, and one of the things that I do with my clients as well, which some of your clients or people listening might find useful, it's between every activity. So, say for example, if I was going to sit down and do the my painting with the kids, before I go in, I'll just take a moment and think, how do I want to feel at the end of this moment? And just set that intention. Well, I really want to feel connected. I really want to feel creative, and it's setting the intention. It can feel hard sometimes if you're not used to it, setting the intention for the day or the year. But if you can start setting the intention for each moment, how do I want to show up in this meeting? How do I want to show up when I see this friend, or on this date night with my husband, and set how you want to feel by the end of it, then you can tap into those emotions and just be a bit more present. So that's a really nice way to kind of pocket in little intentions into the day.
Oh, well, thank you. And I think that's a good moment to leave on. So, yeah, please do check Noona out on social. And I look forward to when you're releasing your new program.
Talking to you.